Welcome back to Chamber Exchange, a TV show. Again, want to thank our sponsors, St. Vincent Hospital and Bank Hometown. Pleased to have with us Jim Caradonio, probably no stranger to many in the Central Mass audience and certainly the city of Worcester. 9-year superintendent of the Worcester Public Schools, deputy superintendent in Worcester for 6 years prior to that, and somebody who's been very involved in issues of public education across the state for a long time and to this day. Jim, welcome.
Thank you. It's good to be back home.
Yeah. So, Jim, we're going to talk a little bit about the ballot question, question 2, which proposes to eliminate the MCAS as a graduation requirement. And maybe for the viewers who aren't totally familiar, the MCAS is a test that students take in 10th grade. And maybe give a little background and history of it, and then we can talk about how it's utilized by educators.
So back in 1993, when education reform started, and that was my first year in Worcester, the state began a very ambitious program. It was called the Grand Agreement.
Grand Bargain.
Grand Bargain.
Yeah.
And so for more support, more funding,
more money,
we would do higher standards. And the state, in a bipartisan manner, still continues that. And so,
just to go back, I was Governor Weld and Salucci working with the Democratic legislature said if we're going to have residents and businesses, we're going to tax them at a higher rate and invest more of that in education, we want some type of standard to make sure there's a return on investment for those taxpayer dollars.
Exactly. Very simple, and still working on it. So part of that, after about 10 years, 1993 to 2003, they began to use the MCAS, and it was in all certain grades.
And just to go back on that, it wasn't simply just the Republican administration and the Democratic legislature. The teachers' unions at the time actively supported. They wanted these additional and requested these additional funds to be invested into the public education and agreed that there needed to be a standard.
Exactly. And I must say, from the very beginning, the response of the Worcester faculty and the students, it was a typical Worcester thing. Let's pitch in. As you said in your first inaugural address, let's innovate, adapt, and get the job done. And it's a textbook example of innovating, adapting, and getting the job done up until now. So, there was a lot of warning, a lot of preparation, a lot of support, and so the test came in, and over time you had to take the English, and then they added the math, and then they added the science test. And so the goal is, by the time you graduate high school, you have been able, if you didn't pass it the first time, there's a second time, and a third time,
let's just go
and a fourth time.
On that. Jim, for a second. So you're kind of jogging some memory here. So the education reform went in 93. But then it took time to develop the test. There was a phase where students were taking the test, and it was not a requirement. And then I think back my first year as mayor, which would have been 2002 or around that time, it was at that point it became a condition of requirement.
So it was ramped up.
It was ramped up.
Not a surprise.
Not a surprise.
The other thing that people get confused about is that the MCAS is an end. No, it's the means. There's a Southern expression that says pigs don't get fat by weighing them. So it's the feeding, and that's the curriculum standards. So that's what took time. It took time to develop the curriculum standards, and once those were worked out, a lot of community participation, then there was the test, to see to what degree students...
And again, let's just go back on the development of those curriculum standards. Wasn't done in a room, in a back room at DESE, Department of Elementary and Secondary Education in Malden at the time. It was done with community involvement.
Lots of
teachers,
teacher
educators,
involvement.
The unions, parents, administrators, people. Here are the curriculum frameworks that we're going to use for instruction and teaching.
And we had Worcester teachers involved in that development all the way along through a very lengthy public process. And those have been vetted across the country as some of the highest academic standards that any state uses for their students. And so then you said, okay, part of the grand bargain, how do we know that students are meeting them? Came about and developed very professionally, again, with a lot of input from teachers and faculty and parents, not so much students, to develop tests that were valid and reliable. So we had a system now. We had, this is what we're going to teach. We had a valid and reliable way, just as like our doctors. Our doctors know when you go to your doctor and she says, here's your cholesterol test. Well, there's a level, there's a standard, and this test is valid and reliable, and if you meet the standard, great. If you don't, now we'll do treatment to get you up to the standard. The goal is to get you at or above the standard, which will put you on the path to being successul in the 21st century.
And speaking of being successful, all the data shows, and there's been studies that those students that pass the MCAS, their sophomore year,
Yes.
and if they don't pass it their sophomore year,
Right.
there's multiple opportunities for them to retake it, special instruction,
Yes.
Appeals,
Yes.
and we'll get to that in
Yes.
a moment. But their ability to complete college, or even if they don't go on to college, their earnings
Yes.
are higher because
Yes.
they've established a baseline skill
Exactly.
set, which is sophomore level, sophomore
Yes.
and high school level.
Right.
But the other element to this is, in terms of the success, and you've said working together to ramp it up. I remember when it first became a requirement, and there was a lot of prognosticators saying that our urban systems were going to have kids failing by the droves. That didn't happen.
The opposite happened.
Right.
So if you look today, you go back, the state data, 2007 is still available, and the dropout rates have actually plummeted for all kids.
Right.
So the dropout rate now, it used to be 3.4%. For all kids, it's 2.1%. For black students, it was 5.8%. It is now down to 2.8%. And for Latino students, it was way up at close to over 8.3%. And it's almost doubled dropped,
Right.
okay? And the same thing happened with graduation rates. That was the other thing. Oh my God, nobody's going to graduate,
Right.
And it's actually the other way. Same pattern. The graduation rates have gone up for everybody, and they've gone up for black students and Latino students. The other thing that happened, which wasn't on our radar screen, because the students now were stimulated and responded to higher standards and had better skills, over 32,500 students are now taking advanced placement courses. It was 24% increase. We never.
Say that again. Since MCAS has gone in,
Yes.
the number of students
Since
taking
2006,
Yep.
there are 32,500 more students between the 2 years, between 2006 and 2023, who have taken AP courses and tests, and that's a 124% increase.
Right.
And we didn't think about that, and that was
So these students, oftentimes who may come from backgrounds where English is not the first language at
Well,
home, other
exactly.
challenges, economic, otherwise, they're
They're all
able to
there.
attain that basic
Yes,
skill level
and-
as sophomore,
yes.
build that confidence,
Yes.
and now working with teachers who are taking
Yes.
advanced placement courses.
Yes, exactly. And the other thing that you mentioned, what we didn't see on the horizon was the great increase of students whose first language is in English.
Right.
And between 1993, when Ed Reform passed, and last year, there are 67,000 more students
Right.
with limited English speaking ability, which was about 140% increase. So in the meantime, we have more challenging students, and the dropout rates are going down, and the graduation rates are going up. And so the exact opposite happened
Right.
of what the prediction was. And what happened was students and teachers responded to the higher standards.
Right. And so the pass rate, again, at sophomore level, most
Yes.
students are able to pass this.
Yes.
Students who are able to exhaust these other processes,
Yes.
multiple take tests, mentoring, tutoring, this
Yes.
appeals process, the vast majority pass.
Yes.
And so this is, the Mass Association of School Superintendents have come out opposed to this ballot question. Governor Healy, Secretary Tutwiler,
Yes.
who is the Secretary of Education, a former educator in Lynn, Mass.
Yes.
They have come out and urged residents to vote no on eliminating the MCAS as a graduation agreement. And I think people would agree there can be improvements made. But what's so concerning about this ballot question, there's no alternative.
No. Well, the
And-
alternative is to go back and use grades.
But you'd have 351.
Well, more than that.
We have more than three
Districts.
and
And
there's
you have
over
about
351.
you have about
schools.
1,000 high schools, and each high school has multiple teachers.
So there's no that we would eliminate a common standard.
Absolutely. There's no common standard. And we had that before. So I'm here to tell you, in 1993, I was in public education already for over 20 years, okay? And I you know, I was through the system, et cetera. And this, we thought that there was a statement at the time that we had a situation of the soft bigotry of low expectations. And when we first heard that, we weren't happy. But as we went through this process, we realized it was true. And so, and relying on grades was just not valid and reliable. It's terribly subjective.
Right.
And a grade in one place did not mean a grade in another. And so, and then we couldn't figure out how to help Tim Murray if he had a C,
Right.
okay, or a D. And now we have a system that's valid, reliable, standardized, and we can help people who don't make the standard. See, the teachers don't teach to the test. They teach to the curriculum standards.
Which they help develop.
Which they help develop, and the test then says, this is how, it's like your doctor. Again, you go, you're tested for your cholesterol. If you hit this level, you're fine. If not, these are the remedies we take. And the goal is to get you at this level of health. So our goal is to get you at this level of academic health and capacity, et cetera, et cetera. And so this system has worked incredibly. Thank you, teachers and students and parents. And it's down to 1%
Right.
that still needs some help. And I think it's a lot easier to help the 1% than to go back, way back, to a system that didn't work.
Well, for those reasons, we're urging people to vote no on question 2, which would eliminate the MCAS as a graduation requirement without an alternative. So
Yes.
thank you, former Superintendent Jim
Yes,
Caradonio,
good to
for
be
being
back.
with us. Good to see you
Thank
again.
you.